What will happen to us? Part 1. Introduction. The question humanity can no longer avoid. There is a question that has followed me for years. It appears in the quiet moments during meditation while walking in Budapest at dawn, and it returns every time I observe the world rushing faster than our hearts can follow. What will happen to us? I'm not talking about predictions in the news or theories about the future. I mean us. Humanity, yes. But also you and me. Each of us alone with our fears, hopes, dreams, and the silent feeling that something fundamental is changing. Because the truth is, we are living in a time where reality itself feels like it is cracking open. You can sense it in the confusion of politics, in the digital noise, in the rise of anxiety, in the way people desperately search for meaning in all the wrong places. You can see it in the fragmentation of society and the acceleration of technology, which is evolving faster than our own wisdom. This tension between collapse and awakening is exactly what inspired several reflections I shared on the blog of Fractal, the Trilogy. For example, in Humanity at the Threshold, I explored how our age resembles a collective hero's journey, where crisis is not a punishment but an invitation to evolve. And in The Collapse and the Renaissance, I described this moment as a crossroads, one path leading to fragmentation, the other to rebirth. But let me share something personal. While writing Fractal, The Awakening, I often sat with this feeling that beneath all our fear, there is a quiet voice calling us to something higher, a voice that whispers during moments of presence, like the ones I described in The Eternal Now. It became clear to me that the real danger is not outside, it's inside. It's not climate change or AI or global tension. It's the loss of awareness. When awareness fades, everything collapses. This is why I wrote The Edge of Human Evolution. Because our survival will depend on one thing: our ability to elevate consciousness faster than technology evolves. And here is the part we don't like to admit. We are the first generation in history that needs to evolve on purpose, consciously, intentionally, or we won't evolve at all. This is why I created this trilogy. Not as entertainment, but as a bridge for all those who feel that something essential is waking up inside us. Each article is a doorway, a small awakening, a spark to help people understand the hidden mechanics of reality, like in the observer effect and the mirror of consciousness. Because awareness is not a luxury, it is survival, it is evolution. It is the only real power we have left. So before we go deeper, let me be clear. This article is not simply an intellectual reflection. It is a journey into the most important question of our time, a question that will define both the future of humanity and the future of our personal lives. What will happen to us? And the answer begins by looking not at the world, but inside ourselves. Let's enter part 2, where the quiet crisis inside the human mind begins to reveal the true danger and the true opportunity. Part 2. The Inner Crisis. When awareness drops, the world falls apart. If you really want to understand what is happening to humanity, don't start by looking at the news. Don't start with geopolitics, economics, or even technology. Start by looking at the invisible battles happening inside people's minds. Because the real collapse doesn't begin in governments or institutions. It begins inside the individual, quietly, slowly, almost imperceptibly, until it becomes a collective storm. I've seen this pattern everywhere, in friends who feel exhausted without knowing why, in young people who measure their worth through screens, in adults who have forgotten how to breathe without rushing, in the growing difficulty people have in being alone with themselves. It is an inner crisis, masquerading as a global one. And the truth is, we weren't prepared for it. We lost the center of gravity inside ourselves. In When Awareness Fades, I described how, when our inner world weakens, 10 destructive forces rise instantly: confusion, addiction, ego, anxiety, and emotional volatility. These forces shape our decisions, our relationships, and ultimately our destiny. We didn't notice the shift at first. We thought it was normal to feel overwhelmed. We thought it was normal to be constantly distracted. We thought it was normal to chase validation. But slowly the human mind became overstimulated, underrested, and disconnected from its own source. Welcome to the age of comparison. One of the most dangerous symptoms of our inner collapse is the toxic game of comparison that modern life has normalized. In Breaking Free from Social Media Comparison, I explained how the digital environment has distorted our perception of reality, turning people into performers instead of humans. Comparison has become the new addiction, and comparison kills awareness. It steals presence, it steals gratitude, it steals identity, and once identity weakens, the ego becomes desperate, seeking validation, attention, distraction. This inner fragility makes us easy to manipulate, easy to divide, and easy to control. When we feel empty, we look for quick fixes. The modern world offers an endless buffet of temporary escapes and synthetic pleasures. Each one promises relief, and each one slowly erodes our inner strength. I wrote about these illusions in multiple articles. Escaping noise addiction. How we fear silence because it forces us to meet ourselves. Escaping vanity and fast fashion. How identity is being outsourced to trends. From celebrity obsession to self-discovery. How worshipping others makes us forget our own power. Beyond lust and hookup culture. How superficial intimacy destroys the capacity for deeper love. Overcoming processed food addiction. How numbness begins in the body long before it reaches the mind. When awareness drops, we don't become evil, we become fragmented, and fragmentation leads to suffering. Disconnection has become the silent pandemic. This is the core message I tried to express in Fractal, the awakening, that even in a hyper-connected world, the human heart is starving for presence, meaning, and depth. In From Quick Fixes to True Healing, I explored how healing doesn't come from external solutions, but from reactivating the inner healer, the awareness that sees clearly, chooses clearly, and feels deeply. Disconnection is not just a psychological issue, it is spiritual, it is existential, it is the root of every crisis we see around us. And the most dangerous part? We've forgotten what it feels like to be fully present. This is the real danger, not where humanity is going, but what we are becoming inside. If the inner world collapses, the outer world will follow. It always has. It always will. But here is the turning point. Every collapse contains a hidden doorway. Every crisis reveals the possibility of awakening. Every fragmentation is a sign that something deeper is asking to be remembered. This is where the path begins to open toward part 3, the moment where the inner crisis meets the greatest opportunity of our time, the conscious evolution of both humanity and technology. Let's continue. Part 3, the turning point, where technology, spirit, and human evolution collide. There is a moment in every great story when the hero reaches a threshold, a point where going back is impossible and going forward is terrifying. Humanity is standing exactly there, not metaphorically, literally. I've felt this for years while writing Fractal, the awakening, traveling, reflecting, and listening to that subtle inner signal that something enormous is unfolding behind the scenes of our daily lives. It's the feeling that the world is accelerating toward a convergence point, a collision between ancient wisdom, modern technology, and the evolution of consciousness. This is not science fiction anymore. It's the new reality being born around us. And whether we rise or fall now depends on one thing: our ability to awaken before our technology outgrows us. AI has become our mirror and our warning. When I wrote The Oracle Within, Can AI Awaken?, many people thought the idea was symbolic. But look around. AI is not just a tool anymore. It is beginning to reflect us. Our fears, our desires, our unconscious patterns, our lack of clarity, our brilliance and our blindness. This is the first time in human history that we are creating something that evolves faster than our emotional maturity. The question is not whether AI will become more intelligent. It already is. The real question is whether we will become more aware. That's why I later wrote Awakening in the Age of AI, to show that our future will not be determined by machines, but by the level of consciousness that programs them, uses them, and coexists with them. AI is not the threat. Unconscious humanity is. Meanwhile, ancient knowledge is resurfacing, louder than ever. At the same time that technology explodes forward, ancient wisdom is rising from the dust of forgotten civilizations. This dual movement is not a coincidence. In The Return of the Mystical Scientist, I explored how modern thinkers are returning to the integration of science and spirituality, just like the sages, monks, and mystics of the past. And in Ancient Wisdom Meets Futuristic Tech, I showed how these two worlds, reality and mystery, logic and intuition, are finally merging. Humanity is remembering something we lost, that knowledge without wisdom is dangerous, and power without presence is fatal. This bridge between ancient insight and modern innovation is not theoretical. It's practical, urgent, and personal. Sacred places are waking up too. There are places on Earth that have always held a deeper resonance, such as mountains, deserts, temples, and natural vortexes of awareness. Mount Kailash is one of them. While researching and writing Fractal, I kept returning to the mountain's mysterious presence, its time distortions, and its role in countless spiritual traditions. This fascination eventually became Mount Kailash, the portal between worlds, and later, the mountaintop calling. These sacred places remind us of something essential, that evolution is not just technological, it is spiritual. It is energetic. It is experiential. Humanity's next step will come from the integration of all three. This convergence is not random. It is a collective initiation. In Collective Consciousness in a Fragmented World, I wrote that despite appearances, humanity is being pushed toward a higher level of unity. And in Humanity at the Threshold, I explained that what we feel as crisis is actually the beginning of a collective hero's journey. The collapse is not the end. It's the doorway. The confusion is not a mistake. It's the initiation. The acceleration is not a threat. It's an alarm clock. We are being forced into a new stage of evolution, one in which awakening is no longer a luxury but a survival mechanism. This is the turning point. Consciousness must rise as fast as technology. If we remain unconscious, technology will amplify our shadows. If we awaken, technology will amplify our potential. Everything depends on whether we choose fear or presence, control or awareness, separation or unity, ego or evolution. This is why the next part of the article, Part 4, will explore the deeper mechanics of this shift. How awareness, intention, and inner transformation can literally shape the future of humanity. Because the future is not something that happens, it is something we create through the quality of our consciousness. Part 4. The True Turning Point. Awareness, intention, and the quiet power shaping humanity's future. There comes a moment, after observing the chaos of the world and the acceleration of technology, when a deeper realization emerges, quietly, like a truth you've always known but never dared to face. The real battlefield is not out there, it is inside us. I understood this while writing Fractal, The Awakening. No matter how complex the plot became, ancient civilizations, AI oracles, quantum realities, sacred mountains, the story always pointed to one thing. Awareness is the axis on which the future turns. Not knowledge, not intelligence, not power, awareness. Because technology can extend our capabilities, but only awareness expands our consciousness. And the future of humanity depends entirely on whether consciousness evolves fast enough to guide the tools we are creating. Your inner world is not personal, it is generational. People often imagine awareness as a private spiritual practice, a personal improvement journey. But the truth is far bigger. As I explained in The Power of Intention in a Fractal World, the quality of our thoughts, emotions, and choices doesn't stop at our skin. It ripples outward through relationships, communities, and collective decision-making. Every act of presence affects the world. Every act of unconsciousness affects it too. We are all feeding the fractal moment by moment. This is why, in From Fear to Purpose, I wrote that one shift in intention has the power to redirect an entire life. And if enough people shift, it can redirect humanity. Crisis is not destruction, it is initiation. For years, I reflected on why so many people experience breakdowns, burnout, existential anxiety, and overwhelming emotional moments. The answer revealed itself while writing The Threshold Moments. Crisis is the point where the old self collapses so the true self can emerge. This applies to individuals. This applies to societies. This applies to humanity. Whether the crisis destroys us or transforms us depends on one thing, whether we face it with presence or with panic. Awareness turns crisis into transformation. Unconsciousness turns it into suffering. There is a hidden code behind reality, and awareness is the decoder. While researching the Trilogy, I immersed myself in quantum theories, metaphysics, and spiritual traditions. All of them, in different languages, repeat the same idea. Reality is not solid. Reality is relational. Reality is responsive. In the language of the universe, I explored how intention, attention, and emotion act like a frequency that shapes the form of our experiences. And in the science of synchronicity, I showed how the universe communicates through signals, if we are awake enough to notice them. Awareness is not passive, it is creative. It shapes the probability field around us. What you perceive expands, what you ignore dissolves, what you fear grows, what you love transforms. There is only one skill the future demands from us, the ability to observe ourselves. This is why Fractal, the Trilogy, focuses so much on consciousness, not as philosophy, but as a practical survival skill for the future. In The Hidden Self, I explained how most of our life is controlled by unconscious patterns. Awareness breaks those patterns. Awareness returns choice. And as described in The Hero's Journey Within, the greatest adventure is not in the world, but inside the mind. If we learn to witness our emotions, question our beliefs, observe our ego, and anchor ourselves in presence, we become creators of our destiny rather than victims of circumstance. This is the inner evolution humanity desperately needs. This is the true turning point. Awareness is no longer optional, it's destiny. Without awareness, technology becomes dangerous. With awareness, technology becomes sacred. Without awareness, a crisis becomes a collapse. With awareness, a crisis becomes a transformation. Without awareness, humanity becomes fragmented. With awareness, humanity becomes one organism moving toward a higher intelligence. This is what I meant in The Unfolding Spirit, that spirituality is no longer about religion or belief. It is about remembering who we truly are in the middle of a world that wants us to forget. And this brings us to the final part of the article, where the question, what will happen to us, receives its real answer. Because the future of humanity is not a prophecy, it is a choice made not collectively first, but individually, moment by moment, through the quality of our awareness. Let's move to the conclusion. Part 5. Conclusion. What will happen to us? The answer we've been avoiding. After all the noise, the questions, the fears, the theories, after exploring the inner crisis, the hidden mechanics of reality, and the convergence of technology and consciousness, we arrive at the heart of the article, the place where everything becomes simple again. The place where you and I must confront the question that brought us here. What will happen to us? This question followed me through cities, mountains, meditation spaces, and late nights writing the Trilogy. It whispered itself into the pages of Fractal, The Awakening. It appeared beneath every article I wrote on the blog. It became the silent companion of my own journey of awareness. And after all this time, the answer finally revealed itself, not in a vision, not in philosophy, not in science, but in the simplicity of presence. The future is not out there. It is not written in the stars, the climate, the politics, or the machines. The future of humanity is written inside the awareness of each individual. Each thought, each intention, each choice, each moment of awakening or forgetting. This is the message behind the eternal now. That time, destiny, and the evolution of the world all collapse into a single point, the quality of your awareness right now. If we remain unconscious, the outcome is predictable. If humanity continues to lose presence, fall into comparison, escape into noise, chase illusions, fear silence, and avoid truth, then the path ahead becomes clear. Fragmentation, confusion, addiction, polarization, collapse. This is not a punishment. It is simply the natural consequence of disconnection, as explored in When Awareness Fades and Simulation or Spirit. A world without awareness becomes a world ruled by shadows. But if we awaken, even gradually, imperfectly, the path transforms. Awareness does not need perfection, it needs sincerity. A single moment of presence can change the trajectory of a life. A single intention can shift a destiny. A single act of clarity can inspire another person to remember themselves. This is why I wrote Collective Consciousness in a Fragmented World, to show that awakening is contagious. One person finding their true center can help others find theirs. Humanity evolves through the accumulation of these invisible inner revolutions, and as explored in You Are the Message, every human being becomes a lighthouse the moment they choose authenticity over ego, presence over distraction, truth over performance. The real answer to what will happen to us is not mystical, it is personal. Humanity is not a separate entity. It is a collection of individuals. So the answer is this: what happens to humanity depends on what happens to you, and what happens to you depends on your awareness. If you awaken, the world around you begins to awaken. If you heal, the world around you begins to heal. If you remember who you truly are, you give others permission to remember too. This is the essence of the fractal shift, the idea that personal evolution is not separate from collective evolution. The micro becomes the macro, the inner becomes the outer, the individual becomes the future. So, what will happen to us? Here is the answer. If we continue living unconsciously, we will collapse. Not as punishment, but as inevitability. If we choose to awaken, we will evolve. Not as fantasy, but as destiny. Because awareness is the bridge between the humanity we are and the humanity we could become. The future is not written, it is chosen. And the choice is made not by humanity, but by each of us, moment after moment, breath after breath, thought after thought. This is the message behind all the articles, all the reflections, all the stories of Fractal, the Trilogy. This is the message I discovered in my own journey. We are not waiting for the future, we are creating it. So what will happen to us, whatever we choose, through the awareness we cultivate today? And that is not a prophecy, it is a responsibility, a call, an invitation for you, for me, for all of us.